The dust cloud on the horizon meant trouble. Delilah Keating could feel it in her bones as she peered through the window of the stagecoach, the Montana Territory stretching endlessly before her. The year was 1876, and the promise of a new life in Miles City with her younger sister, Emma, had seemed like a godsend after the death of their parents just months before. Now, as the approaching riders drew closer, that promise turned to ash in her mouth. "Something's wrong," Delilah whispered, gripping her sister's hand. At 22, she had taken on the responsibility of 18-year-old Emma with unwavering determination. "Those aren't outriders." Emma's face paled beneath her bonnet. "Bandits." Before Delilah could answer, the crack of gunfire split the air. The stagecoach lurched violently as the driver slumped forward. The horses screamed in panic, veering sharply off the rutted trail. "Get down." Delilah pulled her sister to the floor as the coach careened wildly before crashing onto its side. Wood splintered, and dust billowed through the broken windows. Pain lanced through Delilah's shoulder, but she bit back a cry, focusing instead on Emma's terrified face. "You hurt, Del." Emma's voice trembled, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. "I'll be fine," Delilah lied, hearing the pounding of hooves drawing closer. "Listen to me. Whatever happens, stay calm. We'll get through this." The door wrenched open above them, flooding the overturned coach with harsh sunlight. A bearded face appeared, grinning beneath a filthy hat. "Well, well, what have we here?" the man drawled. "Boys, looks like we struck gold." Rough hands dragged them from the wreckage. Delilah counted 5 men, all armed, their faces weathered and cruel beneath the brim of dusty hats. The stagecoach driver and the shotgun guard lay motionless on the ground nearby. "Please," Delilah began, standing protectively in front of Emma. "We have money. Take it. Just let us go." The tallest of the men, clearly the leader with a jagged scar running from his temple to his jaw, laughed. "Oh, we'll take your money, miss. But that ain't all we're after. Tie them up," he ordered. "We'll take them back to the canyon. Jasper's expecting us by nightfall." Delilah fought as they bound her wrists with rough rope, earning a slap that made her ears ring. Emma sobbed quietly as they received the same treatment, the younger girl's eyes wide with terror. "What about the others, Pike?" one of the men asked, gesturing to the 2 other passengers, an elderly man who appeared to be unconscious and a middle-aged woman who was crying silently. The leader, Pike, considered for a moment, then shrugged. "Leave 'em. They ain't worth the trouble." Delilah and Emma were thrown roughly onto horses, their bound hands making it nearly impossible to stay balanced. As they rode away from the stagecoach wreckage, Delilah tried desperately to memorize landmarks, fighting against the growing panic in her chest. Hours passed under the blistering sun. They traveled deeper into unfamiliar terrain, the flat plains giving way to rocky outcroppings and sparse pine forests. Delilah's mouth grew parched, her shoulder throbbing with each jolt of the horse beneath her. Emma had stopped crying, her face blank with shock. "Why are you doing this?" Delilah finally asked as the sun began to sink. "We're of no value to you." Pike rode up alongside her, his horse matching pace. "That's where you're wrong, miss. Pretty things like you fetch a fine price down Mexico way. Some rich ranchero will pay good money, especially for a matched pair of sisters." The cold realization of their fate sent ice through Delilah's veins. She'd heard whispered stories of women disappearing along the frontier, sold into unspeakable circumstances. "We'll never make it to Mexico," she said with more confidence than she felt. "People will come looking for us." Pike merely laughed. "No one knows these hills like we do, miss. By the time anyone figures out what happened to that stagecoach, you'll be long gone." As dusk fell, they entered a narrow canyon, the walls rising high on either side. A crude camp had been established in a clearing, several tents, a fire pit, and horses tethered nearby. 3 more men lounged around the fire, looking up with interest as the riders approached. "Looks like you boys had a productive day," called a heavy-set man with a thick mustache, rising to his feet. "Found these 2 on the Miles City stage," Pike replied, dismounting. "Figured Jasper would appreciate the bonus when he gets back." Delilah and Emma were roughly pulled from their horses and pushed toward a large boulder near the edge of the camp. One of the men secured their bound hands to a stake driven into the ground, leaving them enough slack to sit, but not to stand or move far. "Get comfortable, ladies," Pike sneered. "You'll be here a while. Jasper won't be back till tomorrow, and he'll want to inspect the merchandise before we head south." As darkness fell completely, the bandits gathered around the fire, passing bottles and sharing crude jokes. Delilah shifted closer to her sister, trying to shield her from both the chill of the night and the leering glances thrown their way. "I'm scared, Del," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible over the crackling fire. "I know," Delilah replied, working her wrists against the ropes until they were raw and bleeding. "But we'll find a way out of this, I promise." Hours crawled by. Some of the men eventually retired to tents while others slumped where they sat, lulled by alcohol into uneasy sleep. Only one remained awake, keeping watch near the canyon entrance. Just before dawn, when the sky had barely begun to lighten, Delilah jerked awake at the sound of a quiet thud. The guard by the canyon entrance was no longer visible. She strained her eyes in the dim light, wondering if he had moved positions. A shadow detached itself from the canyon wall, moving with deliberate stealth toward their position. Delilah tensed, ready to cry out and wake the camp if necessary. The figure crouched beside them, and Delilah found herself looking into the bluest eyes she'd ever seen, set in a face tanned by sun and wind beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "Don't make a sound," the stranger whispered, drawing a knife from his belt. "I'm here to help." The knife made quick work of their bonds. As the ropes fell away, Delilah rubbed her raw wrists, eyeing the stranger warily despite his claim. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Name's Ryker Vance," he replied, his voice a low rumble. "Tracked these vermin for 3 days after they hit a homestead south of here. Wasn't expecting to find hostages." He gestured toward the sleeping bandits. "We need to move fast before they wake." "Can you ride?" Delilah nodded, helping Emma to her feet. The younger girl was trembling but determined. "My horse is hidden just beyond the ridge," Ryker explained. "We'll have to a shout from the camp cut him off. One of the bandits had risen for an early morning call of nature and spotted them. They're getting away," the man bellowed, scrambling for his gun. "Run." Ryker pushed the sisters toward the canyon entrance, drawing his revolver in one fluid motion. "Head for the big pine at the mouth of the canyon. My horse is there." As they fled, gunfire erupted behind them. Ryker turned, firing methodically at the awakening camp. 2 bandits fell before the others could take cover. Delilah pulled Emma along, her heart hammering in her chest. The canyon mouth seemed impossibly far away as bullets kicked up dust at their heels. They reached the towering pine just as Pike and 3 others emerged from the canyon in pursuit, guns blazing. "Get on!" Ryker appeared beside them, gesturing to a magnificent chestnut stallion tethered behind a boulder. He fired again at their pursuers, forcing them to seek cover. "I'll hold them off. There's too many." Delilah protested as she helped Emma onto the horse. "Trust me," Ryker replied, a grim smile touching his lips. "I've faced worse odds." Delilah climbed up behind her sister, taking the reins. "We can't just leave you." "Head east," he instructed, ignoring her objection. There's a creek about 5 miles out. Follow it north until you reach a trading post. Man named Callahan runs it. Tell him Ryker sent you." Before she could argue further, a bullet splintered the bark near Ryker's head. He slapped the horse's flank, sending it lurching forward with the sisters clinging to its back. "Go," he shouted, turning to fire again at the approaching bandits. The last Delilah saw of him was his tall figure standing defiantly at the canyon mouth, revolver raised against the 5 men closing in. The chestnut stallion thundered across the open terrain, seemingly knowing the way without guidance. Delilah struggled to maintain her seat while keeping a protective arm around Emma. "He's going to die because of us," Emma cried, her words nearly lost to the wind. "He made his choice," Delilah replied, though guilt weighed heavily on her heart. The sound of gunfire had faded behind them, leaving only uncertainty about the cowboys' fate. They rode for what seemed like hours, the landscape gradually changing from rocky outcroppings to rolling hills dotted with pine and aspen. Eventually they came upon the promised creek, its clear water flowing between mossy banks. "We should stop," Emma suggested, her voice hoarse. "The horse needs water." Delilah reined in beside the creek, helping her sister dismount before sliding down herself. Her legs nearly buckled, muscles screaming in protest after the long ride and their ordeal. As the horse drank deeply, Delilah examined her sister in the morning light. Emma's face was scratched and bruised, her dress torn and dirty. Delilah knew she looked no better. "Let's clean up a bit," she suggested, kneeling by the water. The cool creek soothed her raw wrists as she washed away the dirt and blood. "You think he's dead?" Emma asked quietly, splashing water on her face. Delilah hesitated. "I don't know. He seemed capable." "More than capable," a familiar voice said from behind them. Delilah whirled to find Ryker Vance emerging from the trees, leading a dappled gray horse. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, revealing a blood-stained bandage, but he was very much alive. "You made it," Emma exclaimed, a genuine smile breaking through her exhaustion. "Told you I've faced worse odds," he replied with a slight grin, though Delilah noticed he moved stiffly, favoring his left side. "You're hurt," she observed, stepping toward him. He shrugged, then winced at the movement. "Bullet grazed me. Nothing serious. How did you escape? There were so many of them." "Pike and his boys aren't as good as they think they are," Ryker said, leading his horse to the water. "I picked off 2 more, then led the rest on a chase through the hills before doubling back. They'll be searching in the wrong direction for a while." "Thank you," Delilah said softly, "for saving us. We owe you our lives." Ryker's blue eyes met hers, and something passed between them, a connection that made her breath catch despite their dire circumstances. "No debt between us, Miss Keating, Delilah Keating, and this is my sister, Emma," he nodded. "Well, Miss Keating, we're not safe yet. Pike's gang is part of a larger outfit that controls this territory. They won't give up easily." "You said something about a trading post," Emma reminded him. "Callahan's." "It's about half a day's ride north along this creek. We'll find supplies and shelter there." They rested for an hour, sharing the jerky and hardtack Ryker had in his saddlebags. As they prepared to continue their journey, Delilah noticed him grimace as he tightened his horse's girth. "Let me see that wound," she insisted. "It's fine," he protested, but she was already unwrapping the crude bandage. The bullet had indeed only grazed him, but the wound was angry and red. Delilah tore a strip from her petticoat, soaked it in the creek, and carefully cleaned the injury before rebinding it. "My father was a doctor," she explained as she worked. "He taught me a few things." "Was?" Ryker asked quietly. "He and our mother died of fever 6 months ago. We were on our way to Miles City to stay with our aunt." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I'm sorry for your loss." "What about you?" Emma asked, always the more direct of the sisters. "What brings you to hunting bandits in the Montana Territory?" A shadow crossed his face. "That's a long story for another time." They mounted up and continued north along the creek. Ryker rode beside them, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Delilah found herself studying him when she thought he wasn't looking the strong line of his jaw, the way the sun brought out golden highlights in his brown hair, the capable hands that held the reins with easy confidence. By late afternoon, the trading post came into view, a sturdy log structure with smoke rising from its chimney, surrounded by several outbuildings. A hand-painted sign reading "Callahan's Trading Post" hung above the door. "Stay alert," Ryker warned as they approached. "Callahan's trustworthy, but we don't know who else might be around." The door opened as they dismounted, revealing a barrel-chested man with a thick beard streaked with gray. He squinted at them before breaking into a wide smile. "Ryker Vance, thought you'd be halfway to Cheyenne by now." "Change of plans, Patrick," Ryker replied, clasping the man's outstretched hand. "These ladies need shelter and supplies. Had a run-in with Pike's gang." Callahan's expression darkened. "Nasty business, that lot. Come in, come in. My wife will fix you something hot to eat." The interior of the trading post was warm and smelled of wood smoke and coffee. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with everything from canned goods to tools to bolts of fabric. A pot-bellied stove radiated heat from one corner. A plump woman with kind eyes emerged from a back room, quickly taking in their disheveled state. "Land's sakes, you poor dears look half dead." "Martha, this is Miss Delilah Keating and her sister, Emma," Ryker introduced them. "They've had a rough couple of days." "I can see that," Martha Callahan said, bustling forward. "Come with me. I'll draw you a hot bath and find you some clean clothes while your things are washed." Delilah hesitated, looking at Ryker. "Go on," he encouraged. "Patrick and I need to talk anyway." The next few hours passed in a blur of blessed comfort. The hot bath was heavenly, easing muscles Delilah hadn't realized were aching. Martha provided simple but clean dresses for both sisters, and insisted they eat bowls of hearty stew before even thinking about what came next. "Your young man is quite something," Martha commented as she poured Delilah a cup of tea. They sat at a small table in the kitchen while Emma dozed in a chair by the fire, exhaustion finally claiming her. "He's not my young man," Delilah corrected, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "We only met this morning when he rescued us." Martha's eyebrows rose. "Is that so? Well, the way he looks at you had me fooled." Before Delilah could question this observation, Ryker and Patrick entered from the trading post floor, their expressions grave. "What is it?" Delilah asked, immediately alert. "Word is Pike's men are searching every homestead and camp within 20 miles, Patrick explained. "They're telling folks they're looking for horse thieves, but we know better." "They won't give up," Ryker added. "Pike answers to Jasper Reeves, and Reeves doesn't take kindly to losing merchandise or men." Delilah flinched at being referred to as merchandise, but the reality of their situation was inescapable. "What do we do? We can't stay here and put you all in danger." "You'll leave at first light," Patrick said firmly. "I've got a wagon you can use. Take the North Trail to Fort Keogh. The Army will provide protection until you can get safely to Miles City." "I'll escort them," Ryker stated, his tone making it clear this wasn't open for discussion. Patrick and Martha exchanged a look Delilah couldn't interpret. "Figured you'd say that," Patrick replied. "Martha's putting together provisions now." That night, Delilah and Emma shared a small but comfortable room behind the trading post. Despite her exhaustion, Delilah found sleep elusive. Rising quietly to avoid waking Emma, she slipped out into the main room of the trading post, intending to make a cup of tea. She found Ryker seated at a table near the stove, cleaning his revolver by the light of a single lantern. "Can't sleep?" he asked without looking up. "Too much on my mind," she admitted, taking the chair opposite him. "May I ask you something?" His hands paused their methodical work. "Ask. Why are you doing this? You could have left us at the trading post. Fort Keogh isn't your responsibility." Ryker reassembled the revolver with practiced efficiency before answering. "Pike and his men are part of something bigger, a network that's been terrorizing this territory for years. Stealing, killing, trafficking." His jaw tightened. "I've been hunting them for a long time." "Why? Are you a lawman?" A humorless smile touched his lips. "No, not anymore." When he didn't elaborate, Delilah pressed gently. "Then why risk your life for strangers?" Ryker's blue eyes lifted to meet hers, and the pain she saw there made her breath catch. 3 years ago, Reeves and his men raided a settlement near the Yellowstone River. Killed everyone who resisted, took whatever they wanted. Understanding dawned. "You lost someone." He nodded once. "My sister. She was 16. By the time I tracked them down, she was." He couldn't finish the sentence. Delilah reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "I'm so sorry." His fingers tightened briefly around hers. "When I saw you and your sister tied up in that camp, I couldn't." He shook his head. "Couldn't let history repeat itself." They sat in silence for a moment, connected by the simple touch of hands and the weight of shared understanding. "We should both get some rest," Ryker finally said, withdrawing his hand. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Delilah nodded, rising from the table. "Thank you for telling me. And thank you again for saving us." As she turned to go, his voice stopped her. "Miss Keating, Delilah," she looked back. "I won't let anything happen to either of you, that's a promise." In the soft lamplight, with his guard momentarily lowered, Ryker Vance looked less like the hardened fighter who had faced down a gang of bandits, and more like a man who had carried a terrible burden for too long. Delilah felt something shift inside her heart. "I believe you," she said softly before returning to her room. They departed Callahan's trading post at dawn, a light mist hanging over the land. The wagon was sturdy but plain, loaded with supplies and covered with a canvas tarp. Emma and Delilah sat on the bench seat while Ryker drove, his chestnut stallion tied behind. "It's about 60 miles to Fort Keogh," he explained as they set out. "With good weather, we can make it in 2 days." The trail wound through forested hills, occasionally breaking into open meadows carpeted with wildflowers. Under different circumstances, Delilah might have found the journey pleasant. As it was, every distant rider or unexpected sound had her tensing with fear. Ryker seemed unconcerned, but Delilah noticed how his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, how his rifle lay ready across his lap. "Tell me about Miles City," he said after several hours of traveling in relative silence. "What awaits you there?" "Our aunt, Margaret Keating," Delilah replied. "She's my father's sister. Never married, but she runs a millinery shop in town. We've only met her once years ago when she visited us in St. Louis. She knows you're coming." "Yes, we wrote to her after our parents died. She insisted we come live with her rather than trying to manage on our own." Emma, who had been quiet most of the morning, suddenly spoke up. "Do you think the stage company will send someone looking for us? There were other passengers." "If they survived, yes," Ryker answered honestly. "But Pike's men are clever. They'll have hidden the wreckage, made it look like an accident or an Indian attack. Then no one knows we're missing except the bandits," Delilah concluded grimly. "And that's an advantage," Ryker pointed out. "They won't expect you to reach Miles City. Once you're there, under the protection of the law and your family, they'll have to move on." "And what about you?" Emma asked. "What will you do once we reach Miles City?" A muscle worked in Ryker's jaw. Continue what I started. Reeves is still out there. Delilah studied his profile, the determination etched in every line. You can't fight an entire gang alone, Ryker. You'll get yourself killed. Maybe, he conceded, but I made a promise at my sister's grave. The day wore on. They stopped briefly at midday to rest the horses and eat a cold meal from their provisions. By late afternoon, dark clouds were gathering on the horizon. Storm coming, Ryker observed, frowning at the sky. We'll need to find shelter soon. Is there a town nearby? Delilah asked, pulling her shawl tighter against the freshening wind. No, but there's an old line shack about 5 miles ahead, used by cowboys during roundups, but it should be empty this time of year. They pushed on as the first fat raindrops began to fall. By the time they reached the line shack, a crude but solid structure built into the side of a hill, the rain was coming down in sheets, and thunder rumbled across the darkened sky. Ryker helped them down from the wagon before leading the horses to a lean-to shelter attached to the shack. Inside, the cabin was dusty but dry, with a small stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and a narrow cot in one corner. Not exactly the Palmer house, he commented wryly as he brought in their supplies, but it'll keep us dry. Soon, a fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the log walls. Ryker had found some canned beans and coffee in the cabin's meager stores, supplementing their own provisions for a simple but satisfying meal. As they ate, the storm intensified, rain lashing against the single window and wind howling through the eaves. No traveling tomorrow if this keeps up, Ryker observed, pouring more coffee into their tin cups. The creek we need to cross will be too high. Delilah tried to hide her dismay. Every day delayed was another day Pike and his men had to search for them. Don't worry, Ryker said, reading her expression. This actually works in our favor. They won't be able to track us in this weather either. After dinner, Emma quickly fell asleep on the cot, wrapped in a blanket Martha Callahan had provided. Delilah sat by the fire with Ryker, listening to the storm rage outside. You should rest too, he suggested. Take the other half of the cot with your sister. I'll keep watch. You need sleep as much as we do, Delilah countered. And that wound needs to heal. His lips quirked in what might have been a smile. Been taking care of myself a long time, Miss Keating. Delilah, she corrected. After everything we've been through, I think we're beyond formalities. His blue eyes studied her thoughtfully. Delilah, then. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the steady drumming of rain on the roof. Tell me about your life before, Ryker eventually said. In St. Louis. It was. Ordinary, I suppose. My father had a small medical practice. My mother taught Emma and me at home reading, writing, music, all the proper accomplishments for young ladies. Delilah smiled at the memory. I wanted to follow in my father's footsteps, but he insisted medicine was no profession for a woman. Still, he taught me what he could. He sounds like a good man. He was. Both my parents were, she sighed, poking at the fire with a stick. When the fever came, he worked day and night tending to the sick. Eventually, he and my mother both fell ill. There was nothing I could do to save them. Ryker's hand covered hers briefly. That's a heavy burden to carry. What about your family? Delilah asked, turning the conversation away from painful memories. You mentioned your sister, but what about your parents? My father was a rancher in Wyoming Territory. Tough man, but fair. Taught me everything I know about horses and hard work. Ryker's face softened slightly with the memory. My mother died when I was 12. After that, it was just Pa, me, and my sister, Catherine. And your father, Hart gave out 6 years ago. Left the ranch to both of us, but I was wearing a deputy's badge by then in a town near Cheyenne. Katie managed the place mostly on her own. His expression darkened, until Reeves and his men came through. Delilah could see the pain etched in the lines around his eyes. Without thinking, she moved closer, placing her hand on his arm. "You don't have to tell me." "No, he took a deep breath. "I was tracking a horse thief when it happened. Didn't even know until I returned 3 days later. They'd burned the ranch house, killed the hands, took Katie." His voice had dropped to barely a whisper. "I spent 6 months tracking them. By the time I found her." He couldn't continue. Delilah's hand tightened on his arm. "You don't need to say more." "I buried her proper," he finally continued. "Then I turned in my badge and started hunting Reeves and his gang. Been at it for nearly 3 years now." "Ryker," Delilah said softly. "Vengeance won't bring her back." His eyes, when they met hers, were haunted. "I know that, but it might stop the same thing happening to someone else's sister." Understanding dawned. "That's why you helped us. You saw your sister in Emma." "In both of you," he corrected. "2 sisters alone in dangerous country. History has a way of repeating itself if no one stands against it." Impulsively, Delilah leaned forward and pressed her lips to his cheek. "Thank you," she whispered. When she pulled back, the look in his eyes made her heart skip. For a moment she thought he might close the distance between them again, but instead he stood abruptly. "You should get some rest," he said, his voice rough. "I'll take first watch." Delilah nodded, knowing that pushing further would only cause him to withdraw more. As she settled beside Emma on the narrow cot, she found herself thinking about the complex, wounded man who had saved their lives. She had never believed in the idea of fate or destiny, preferring the rational world her father had inhabited. But meeting Ryker Vance in their darkest hour seemed like more than mere coincidence. Whether it was providence or simple luck, she was grateful for his presence and increasingly aware of the way her pulse quickened whenever their eyes met. With the sound of the rain and Ryker's steady presence nearby, Delilah finally drifted into exhausted sleep. The storm continued through the night and into the next day, confining them to the line shack. By mid-afternoon, cabin fever had set in. Emma paced restlessly while Delilah tried to distract herself by taking inventory of their supplies. "We're running low on coffee," she announced, peering into one of their packs. "There's a deck of cards in that cupboard," Ryker said, nodding toward a rough shelf near the fireplace. "Might help pass the time." Emma eagerly retrieved the worn deck, and they spent several hours playing various games around the small table. Ryker proved to have an excellent poker face, though Delilah suspected he deliberately lost a few hands to Emma to keep her spirits up. It was during a particularly competitive round that they heard the distant sound of horses approaching. Ryker was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. "Stay away from the windows," he ordered, moving to peer cautiously through a crack in the shutter. "Is it them?" Delilah whispered, gathering Emma close. "3 riders," he confirmed grimly. "Can't make out who yet." He moved quickly around the cabin, checking his weapons and extinguishing the fire with a pot of water. "If it's Pike's men, there's a trapdoor under the rug leading to a root cellar," he explained rapidly. "Get down there and stay quiet no matter what you hear." "What about you?" Emma asked, her face pale with fear. "I'll lead them away from here if I can. If not," he shrugged. "I've been in tighter spots." The riders drew closer, and Ryker tensed as they approached the cabin. Delilah held her breath, one hand clutching Emma's, the other reaching instinctively for Ryker's arm. Then, unexpectedly, Ryker relaxed slightly. "It's not Pike," he said, though he didn't lower his rifle. A voice called from outside. "Hello, the cabin. Anyone home? Stay here," Ryker instructed, moving toward the door. He opened it a crack, keeping his body shielded. "Who's asking?" "Lieutenant James Winters, Fort Keogh Cavalry Patrol," came the reply. We're checking line cabins after reports of bandits in the area. Ryker glanced back at Delilah, who nodded encouragingly. He opened the door wider, though his rifle remained ready. 3 men sat on horseback outside, all wearing the unmistakable uniform of U.S. cavalry. The leader, a young officer with a neatly trimmed mustache, raised an eyebrow at Ryker's wary stance. "Apologies for disturbing you, sir," the lieutenant said. "May I ask your business in this territory?" "Escorting these ladies to Miles City," Ryker replied, gesturing for Delilah and Emma to come forward. "Their stagecoach was attacked 2 days ago by Pike's gang. We're waiting out the storm before continuing." The lieutenant's expression changed immediately. "Miss Keating?" he asked, looking at Delilah. "And Miss Emma Keating?" Delilah stepped forward in surprise. "Yes, that's right. How did you know? Your aunt in Miles City reported you missing when the stage failed to arrive." "The station agent found the wreckage yesterday, 2 dead, and the other passengers injured but alive. They reported that 2 young women had been taken by the attackers." He looked at Ryker with new respect. "You rescued them, sir." Ryker nodded curtly. "Found them bound in Pike's camp. Got them out before Jasper Reeves showed up." The lieutenant dismounted, signaling his men to do the same. "Lieutenant James Winters, at your service, ladies. Your aunt will be relieved to hear you're safe." Relief washed over Delilah. "You've been looking for us." "2 patrols out since yesterday. We were about to head back to the fort when we saw smoke from your chimney earlier." "The creek's too high to cross today," Ryker explained. "We were planning to try tomorrow." Lieutenant Winters nodded. "The water should be down by morning. We'll escort you to Fort Keogh, then arrange transportation to Miles City." The cavalry's unexpected arrival changed everything. The soldiers set up their own camp just outside the cabin, posting guards through the night. For the first time since the stagecoach attack, Delilah felt truly safe. That evening, as Emma chatted animatedly with the young lieutenant by the fire, Delilah found Ryker alone in the lean-to, checking on his horse. "You've been quiet since they arrived," she observed, leaning against the rough wooden wall. Ryker continued brushing his stallion. "Nothing to say. They mentioned Pike's gang has been raiding homesteads all along the Yellowstone. The Army's been ordered to hunt them down. Good luck to them. Pike knows this country better than any soldier." Delilah studied him in the dim light. "You're planning to leave, aren't you, once we reach the fort?" He finally looked at her. "My business isn't with Pike, it's with Reeves, always has been. And you'll just go back to hunting him alone, even though the Army's involved now." "The Army has its rules, its procedures," Ryker said dismissively. "Reeves doesn't play by those rules." "Neither do you, apparently." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "No, I don't." Delilah stepped closer. "Come to Miles City with us, Ryker, just for a few days. Rest, recover properly, then decide what to do next." "Why?" he asked bluntly. "You'll be safe with your aunt." "You don't need me anymore." "Maybe I want you around for reasons other than protection," she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, followed by what might have been longing. For a moment, Delilah thought he might reach for her, but instead he turned back to his horse. "You don't know me, Delilah. Not really." "I know enough," she countered. "I know you're a good man who's been carrying a terrible burden alone for too long." "Don't mistake gratitude for something else," he said quietly. "Once you're settled in Miles City, you'll forget all about the rough cowboy who helped you out of a bad spot." Delilah's temper flared. "Don't presume to tell me what I'm feeling or what I'll do. I'm not some sheltered girl who doesn't know her own mind." Before he could respond, Lieutenant Winters called from outside. "Miss Keating, there's hot coffee by the fire if you'd like some." "Think about it," Delilah said, turning to go. "That's all I'm asking." Morning brought clear skies and the promise of easier travel. The creek had indeed receded enough to cross safely. As they prepared to depart, Delilah noticed Ryker standing apart from the others, saddling his stallion rather than preparing to drive the wagon. "You're not coming with us," she stated, approaching him. "The lieutenant and his men will see you safely to the fort," he replied, adjusting a saddlebag. "There's no need for me to go farther." Disappointment cut deeper than Delilah had expected. "So that's it, you save us, then disappear." Ryker turned to face her fully. "I'm not good at goodbyes, Delilah, never have been." "Then don't say goodbye," she challenged. "Come to Miles City just for a few days." He hesitated, and for a moment she thought he might agree, then he shook his head. "I can't. Reports say Reeves was spotted near the Bighorn Valley. I need to follow that trail while it's fresh. And if it leads nowhere, like all the others have for 3 years," his jaw tightened, "then I keep looking." Delilah fought back tears of frustration. "What about living, Ryker? When does that start again for you?" "When Reeves is dead," he answered flatly. "Or I am." Lieutenant Winters approached, interrupting their increasingly heated conversation. "We're ready to move out, Miss Keating." He nodded respectfully to Ryker. "Mr. Vance, will you be joining our escort to the fort?" Before Ryker could answer, a shot rang out from the nearby ridge, kicking up dirt at their feet. More gunfire followed as riders appeared on the hilltop. "Take cover," Winters shouted, drawing his pistol as his men scrambled for their rifles. Ryker grabbed Delilah, pulling her behind the wagon as bullets whizzed past. "Pike," he growled, spotting the scarred leader among the attackers, and at least 10 men with him. The cavalry soldiers returned fire, driving the bandits temporarily back over the ridge. Lieutenant Winters crawled to their position. "They have us outnumbered," he reported grimly, "and they've positioned men to cut off our retreat." "The cabin's our best bet," Ryker decided. "Solid logs, defensible position," Winters nodded. "We'll create a diversion, get the ladies inside." As the lieutenant rejoined his men, Ryker turned to Delilah. "Where's Emma?" Horror washed over her as she realized her sister wasn't beside her. She was helping load the wagon. A scream from behind the line shack confirmed her worst fears. Delilah peered around the wagon to see Pike himself dragging a struggling Emma toward a horse. "Ryker," she cried, pointing. Without hesitation, he vaulted over the wagon, firing his revolver as he ran toward Pike. The bandit leader turned, using Emma as a shield, his own gun pressed to her temple. "Drop it, Vance," Pike shouted, "or the girl dies right now." Ryker stopped, his revolver still raised. "Let her go, Pike." "This isn't about her." "No, it's about you interfering in our business," Pike snarled, "killing my men, stealing our merchandise." "I'm the one you want," Ryker replied, slowly lowering his weapon to the ground. "Take me instead," Pike laughed. "Oh, we'll take you too. Reeves has special plans for the man who's been hunting him." Delilah watched in horror as Ryker raised his hands in surrender. Pike's men emerged from cover, moving to disarm and restrain him. "Delilah, stay down," Ryker called over his shoulder. But Delilah wasn't about to hide while Pike took both her sister and the man who had risked everything to save them. Moving quietly behind the cabin, she retrieved the rifle Lieutenant Winters had left propped against a barrel. The cavalry soldiers were pinned down by gunfire from the ridge, unable to help. Pike was dragging Emma toward his horse, while 2 of his men secured Ryker's hands behind his back. Delilah had never fired a rifle before, but her father had shown her the basics of handling firearms years ago. Taking a steadying breath, she raised the weapon, aiming not at Pike but at the ground near his feet. The rifle's report was deafening. Pike jumped in surprise, momentarily loosening his grip on Emma. It was all the opportunity Ryker needed. Despite his bound hands, he slammed his shoulder into one of his captors, sending the man sprawling. then kicked the second man's legs out from under him. "Run, Emma," he shouted. Emma broke free, sprinting toward the cabin. Pike raised his gun to fire after her, but Delilah's second shot, closer this time, made him dive for cover instead. Chaos erupted as the cavalry soldiers, seizing the distraction, mounted a coordinated volley against the bandits on the ridge. Pike's men began falling back, suddenly finding themselves caught in a crossfire. Ryker, still bound, dodged behind a water trough as Pike fired at him repeatedly. Delilah ran to Emma, pulling her sister behind the relative safety of the cabin wall. "Stay here," she instructed, pressing the rifle into Emma's hands. "Shoot anyone who isn't Ryker or wearing a uniform." "Where are you going?" Emma cried. But Delilah was already moving, circling around the back of the cabin toward where Ryker was trapped. She found a discarded knife near one of the fallen bandits and snatched it up. Pike was advancing on Ryker's position, his face contorted with rage. "Come out, Vance," he shouted. "You're dead either way." Delilah crept closer, using the confusion of the ongoing gunfight as cover. When she was near enough, she called out, "Pike!" The bandit whirled, surprise registering on his scarred face before it twisted into a mocking grin. "Well, well, the older sister comes to the rescue. Let him go," Delilah demanded, trying to keep her voice steady despite her pounding heart. Pike laughed. "Or what, darlin'? You gonna stab me with that little knife, if necessary," she replied, tightening her grip on the weapon, his expression hardened. "You've caused me enough trouble." He raised his gun toward her. "Time to end this." Before he could fire, Ryker burst from behind the water trough, throwing his full weight into Pike despite his bound hands. Both men went down hard, struggling in the dirt. Delilah rushed forward, using the knife to slice through the ropes binding Ryker's wrists. Pike, momentarily stunned from the impact, was reaching for his fallen gun when Ryker's now free fist connected with his jaw. The cavalry soldiers had gained the upper hand, driving the remaining bandits into retreat. Lieutenant Winters and one of his men ran to assist Ryker, who had Pike pinned to the ground. "I've been waiting a long time to see you in chains, Pike," the lieutenant said as they secured the bandit leader. "This ain't over," Pike spat, blood trickling from his split lip. "Reeves will come for me, and when he does, you'll all pay." "Reeves is next," Ryker promised, his voice cold. As the soldiers led Pike away, Ryker turned to Delilah, his expression a mix of admiration and concern. "That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever seen." "I couldn't let them take you," she replied simply. He reached out, gently brushing a smudge of dirt from her cheek. "You saved my life." "Now we're even," Delilah said with a shaky smile. Emma came running from the cabin, throwing herself into her sister's arms. "I thought we were going to die," she sobbed. "It's over now," Delilah soothed, holding her close. "Pike's been captured." Lieutenant Winters approached, his uniform dusty but his bearing still professional. "We lost one man, 2 wounded, but they'll recover. We've captured 4 of Pike's gang, including Pike himself. The rest fled." "They'll report to Reeves," Ryker said grimly. "All the more reason to get you ladies safely to the fort as quickly as possible," the lieutenant replied. "We leave in 10 minutes." As Winters walked away, Emma released her death grip on Delilah and turned to Ryker. "You were going to trade yourself for me," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Ryker looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Wouldn't have come to that. Your sister had things well in hand." "Will you come with us now?" Emma asked hopefully. "To Miles City." Ryker's eyes found Delilah's over her sister's head. Something had changed in his gaze, a softening perhaps, or a new resolve. "Yes," he said finally. "I think I will." The journey to Fort Keogh passed without further incident. Pike and his captured men were placed under heavy guard. to be transported to Helena for trial. Lieutenant Winters arranged for a military escort to accompany Delilah, Emma, and Ryker the remaining distance to Miles City. Their aunt's millinery shop stood on a corner of Miles City's Main Street, a tidy two-story building with living quarters above the store. Margaret Keating proved to be a tall, angular woman with the same chestnut hair as her nieces, though liberally streaked with gray. When she saw them approaching, she rushed from the shop, enveloping first Emma, then Delilah in fierce hugs. "I thought I'd lost you both before I even had you," she exclaimed, tears streaming down her lined face. When the stage didn't arrive and then word came about the attack. "We're safe, Aunt Margaret," Delilah assured her. "Thanks to Mr. Vance." Margaret turned to Ryker, who stood awkwardly beside the military wagon that had brought them. "Young man, I don't have words enough to thank you." "No thanks needed, madam," he replied, removing his hat respectfully. "Nonsense," Margaret declared. "You'll stay with us, of course. I have a spare room above the shop." Ryker hesitated. "Don't want to impose." "It's not an imposition when I insist," Margaret said firmly. "Besides, after what my nieces have been through, I'd feel better having someone like you nearby for a while." And so Ryker Vance found himself installed in a small but comfortable room above Keating Millinery, his sparse belongings hanging in a proper wardrobe for the first time in years. Miles City in 1876 was a growing frontier town, fueled by the nearby fort, the cattle trade, and increasing settlement in the territory. The streets were busy with soldiers, cowboys, merchants, and the occasional prospector passing through to the goldfields farther west. Delilah and Emma quickly settled into life with their aunt. Emma helped in the shop, displaying an unexpected talent for trimming hats. Delilah, with her more practical bent, took over managing the household and the shop's accounts. Ryker remained something of a mystery to the townspeople, the quiet, watchful cowboy who had appeared with the Keating sisters and seemed in no hurry to move on. He found occasional work breaking horses at nearby ranches or helping with security at the bank when payrolls came through. Most evenings found him at the Keatings' dinner table, gradually becoming more comfortable with domestic life. Delilah noticed he smiled more frequently now, the haunted look in his eyes fading by small degrees. 2 weeks after their arrival, news reached Miles City that Pike and his captured men had escaped during transport to Helena. The guards had been killed, their bodies left on the trail as a warning. That night, Delilah found Ryker on the small balcony outside his room, staring into the darkness. "You're thinking of leaving, aren't you?" she asked, joining him at the railing. He didn't deny it. "Pike will find Reeves, tell him everything that happened. And you think they'll come here?" It wasn't a question. "Eventually. Reeves doesn't forgive those who cross him." Delilah moved closer, her shoulder brushing his. "So your solution is to go back to hunting them alone. How has that worked for the past 3 years?" Ryker's jaw tightened. "I can't bring trouble to your door, Delilah, not after everything you've been through." "The trouble will find us whether you're here or not," she countered. "Pike saw me and Emma. He knows where we were headed. All the more reason for me to draw them away." Delilah turned to face him fully. "And all the more reason for you to stay and help protect us." In the moonlight, his expression was unreadable, but she sensed the conflict within him. These past weeks had shown her glimpses of the man Ryker might have been before tragedy reshaped his life, intelligent, with a dry sense of humor, capable of surprising gentleness. "I'm not asking you to give up your quest," she said softly. "Just don't face it alone anymore." His hand found hers on the railing, strong fingers intertwining with her own. "I've been alone so long, I'm not sure I remember how to be anything else." "Then let me remind you," Delilah whispered. Rising on tiptoe to press her lips to his, for a moment, he remained still, as if shocked by her boldness. Then his arms wrapped around her, pulling her closer as he returned the kiss with unexpected tenderness. When they finally parted, his forehead rested against hers. "Delilah," he breathed, her name a question and a prayer. "Stay," she urged. "At least until we know what Reeves plans to do, we'll face it together." He nodded slowly. Together. The weeks stretched into months. Summer faded into a golden autumn, and still there was no sign of Reeves or Pike. Life in Miles City developed a comfortable rhythm for the Keating household. Margaret's business thrived with the addition of Emma's creative designs. Delilah found fulfillment assisting the town's overworked doctor, her father's teachings finally put to meaningful use. And Ryker, to his own surprise, accepted a deputy's badge from the town marshal. "Never thought I'd wear one of these again," he confessed to Delilah as they walked along the river one crisp October afternoon. "Feels strange. Good strange or bad strange?" she asked, her hand tucked comfortably in the crook of his arm. He considered. "Different. Like I'm building something instead of just tearing down." Their relationship had blossomed cautiously over the months' quiet conversations on the balcony, walks along the river, stolen kisses when Margaret and Emma weren't looking. Ryker remained reserved by nature, but with Delilah he gradually opened up about his past, his dreams before tragedy struck, his fears about the future. "Have you thought about what happens after Reeves?" she asked now, voicing the question that had hovered between them. "After?" He shook his head. "For so long there was no after in my mind, just the hunt." And now, Ryker stopped walking, turning to face her. The setting sun cast a golden glow across his features as he studied her face. "Now I find myself thinking about a home, land of my own again. Someone to share it with," his voice lowered. "Someone to build a life with." Delilah's heart quickened. "Someone specific in mind." A rare, full smile transformed his face. "I think you know the answer to that, Delilah Keating." Before she could respond, a rider appeared on the trail ahead, pushing his horse hard toward town. Ryker tensed, his hand moving instinctively to the revolver at his hip. The rider reined in when he spotted them. "Deputy Vance." "There's trouble at the saloon, soldiers from the fort brawling with some newcomers in town." "Go home," Ryker told Delilah, already striding toward his horse tethered nearby. "I'll come by later." She nodded, knowing better than to argue when he was in his role as deputy. As she walked back to town alone, Delilah couldn't help smiling at the way life had unfolded. 6 months ago, she had been a proper St. Louis lady heading west to an uncertain future. Now she was assisting a frontier doctor and falling in love with a former gunman turned lawman. The shots echoing from the direction of the saloon wiped the smile from her face. This was no ordinary brawl. Breaking into a run, Delilah hurried toward the commotion. Main Street was in chaos. Townspeople scurried for cover as more gunfire erupted from the Golden Nugget saloon. Marshal Collins crouched behind a water trough, exchanging shots with unseen assailants inside. "What's happening?" Delilah asked a shopkeeper taking shelter in a doorway. "Strangers rode in an hour ago," the man explained nervously. "Started trouble with some soldiers, then pulled guns. Deputy Vance went in to settle things, but they jumped him." Fear clutched at Delilah's heart. "Is he still inside, far as I know?" More shots rang out, followed by the sound of breaking glass. A soldier staggered out of the saloon, clutching his bleeding arm. Without thinking, Delilah ran to him. "Let me help," she said, examining the wound quickly. "It's just a graze. Get to the doctor's office." "Miss Keating," Marshal Collins called. "Get to cover." Instead, Delilah moved to his position. "Ryker's in there," the marshal nodded grimly. 5 men came in looking for trouble. When he tried to settle things down, their leader revealed himself Jasper Reeves. The name hit Delilah like a physical blow. Reeves is here. Now. They've got Vance pinned down inside. Pike's with them too. Before the marshal could stop her, Delilah was moving toward the back of the saloon. There was a service entrance through the kitchen. She'd noticed it once when delivering medicine to the cook. "Miss Keating," Collins hissed, but she was already gone. The alley behind the saloon was deserted. Delilah slipped through the unlocked kitchen door, finding the cook and a barman hiding behind a large work table. "Miss Keating," the cook whispered in shock. "You shouldn't be here." "Where's Deputy Vance?" she asked urgently. The barman pointed toward the swinging door leading to the main room. "Behind the bar. They got him cornered." Delilah peered cautiously through a crack in the door. The saloon was in shambles, tables overturned, glass shattered across the floor. Ryker was indeed behind the bar, blood visible on his temple, exchanging occasional shots with men positioned around the room. At a table near the center sat a man who could only be Jasper Reeves, tall and lean, with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard that did nothing to soften his cold eyes. Pike stood nearby, his scarred face twisted in a malicious grin. "You've been a real thorn in my side, Vance," Reeves called out. "3 years you've been chasing me. Now here we are, and you're the one cornered." "Been waiting a long time for this, Reeves," Ryker replied, his voice steady despite his precarious position. "All because of that sister of yours," Reeves laughed. "She wasn't anything special, boy, just another piece of merchandise." The taunt was designed to enrage Ryker, to make him careless. Delilah held her breath, praying he wouldn't take the bait. "You're going to hang, Reeves," Ryker said calmly, "for Catherine and all the others." Delilah scanned the room, noting the positions of Reeves's men. One stood near the front entrance, another by the windows. Pike and a third man flanked Reeves's table. All were focused on the bar where Ryker was trapped. None were watching the kitchen door. Moving silently, Delilah returned to the cook and barman. "Is there a shotgun back here?" she whispered. The cook nodded, retrieving a double-barreled shotgun from beneath a shelf. "Kept loaded for troublemakers," he explained, handing it to her. "I need a distraction," Delilah said. "Something to draw their attention away from the bar." The barman thought for a moment, then grinned. "Got just the thing." He pointed to several bottles of high-proof whiskey on a shelf. "Throws these against the far wall and they'll make quite a spectacle." Gathering the bottles, they positioned themselves near the door. On Delilah's count of 3, the barman flung the door open, and he and the cook hurled the whiskey bottles against the far wall of the saloon. They shattered spectacularly, the alcohol igniting from the oil lamps nearby. In the moment of confusion, Delilah stepped into the doorway with the shotgun raised. "Ryker, down!" she shouted, then fired both barrels toward the ceiling above Reeves's head. The blast was deafening in the enclosed space. Plaster and wood rained down as the men scattered for cover. Ryker seized the opportunity, vaulting over the bar and tackling Pike to the ground. Outside, Marshal Collins and his posse, hearing the shotgun blast, stormed through the front entrance. Gunfire erupted anew as Reeves's men turned to face this new threat. Delilah dropped the empty shotgun, searching frantically for Ryker in the chaos. She spotted him grappling with Pike near an overturned table, both men fighting for control of a knife. Reeves himself was backing toward a side door, pistol in hand. His cold eyes met Delilah's across the room, and a chill ran through her at the hatred she saw there. "You," he snarled, recognizing her from Pike's description. Raising his gun, he took aim at her heart. Ryker's voice cut through the din. "Reeves!" The outlaw leader turned, instinctively firing at this new threat. His bullet caught Ryker in the side, spinning him away from Pike, but not before Ryker's own shot found its mark. Reeves staggered, clutching his chest, disbelief washing over his features before he collapsed to the floor. No. Pike screamed, lunging for Ryker with renewed fury. Marshal Collins's revolver barked twice, and Pike fell face forward onto the sawdust-strewn floor. The remaining outlaws, seeing their leaders fall, quickly surrendered to the marshal's posse. Delilah rushed to where Ryker lay, blood spreading across his shirt. "You fool," she whispered, tearing strips from her petticoat to staunch the bleeding. "What were you thinking?" Despite the pain, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Couldn't let him shoot you." "Don't you dare die on me, Ryker Vance," Delilah ordered, pressing hard against the wound. "Not now." "Not planning to," he grunted. "Got that future to consider." Marshal Collins knelt beside them. "Doctor's on his way. How bad is it?" Delilah's medical training took over as she examined the wound more carefully. "The bullet went through clean. If we can stop the bleeding and prevent infection, he should recover." "Reeves?" Ryker asked, his voice weak. "Dead," Collins confirmed. "Pike too, it's over, Ryker." A strange expression crossed Ryker's face, part relief, part disbelief, as if he couldn't quite comprehend that his 3-year quest had ended in a shabby saloon in Miles City. "Catherine," he murmured before losing consciousness. The next week passed in a blur for Delilah. Ryker's injury, while serious, proved not to be life-threatening. Dr. Wilson allowed him to be moved to the Keating home after 3 days in his clinic, with strict instructions for bed rest and careful monitoring. Delilah barely left his side, changing bandages, administering medication, and ensuring he followed the doctor's orders, something that proved to be her greatest challenge. "I'm not an invalid," Ryker protested on the 5th day, attempting to rise from the bed in the spare room where he'd been installed. "You were shot," Delilah reminded him, gently but firmly pressing him back against the pillows. "Less than a week ago. If you tear those stitches, you'll be right back where you started." He subsided, though not without a scowl. "I've had worse." "And I'd prefer you not have worse again," she retorted. "Now drink your tea and behave." Emma, bringing in a fresh pot of tea, giggled at their exchange. "He's a terrible patient, isn't he?" "The worst," Delilah agreed. "Stubborn as a mule." "I'm right here," Ryker pointed out dryly. "We know," the sisters chorused. As Emma left, Ryker caught Delilah's hand. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything." She sat on the edge of the bed. "Including shooting up the saloon," a genuine smile lit his face. "Especially that. Never seen anything braver or more foolhardy." "I learned from the best," she replied, squeezing his hand. "You'd have done the same for me." His expression turned serious. "Reeves is really gone?" "Yes. I've been chasing him so long, I'm not sure I know how to stop." Delilah studied him thoughtfully. "What do you feel, now that it's over?" Ryker was silent for a long moment. "Relief, mostly, like a weight's been lifted." He looked troubled, but also empty in a way. "As if I've lost my purpose." "Or maybe you're free to find a new one," she suggested. His blue eyes, clear and focused now without the shadow of vengeance, met hers. "I've been thinking about that, a lot. And I think I'd like to build something here in Miles City." He hesitated. "If I have a reason to stay." Delilah's heart quickened. "What kind of reason did you have in mind?" Instead of answering directly, Ryker reached for something on the bedside table, a small leather pouch. "I've been carrying this for a long time," he explained, emptying the contents into his palm. "It was my mother's." A simple gold band with a small diamond lay in his hand. "I thought I might give it to Katie someday when she found someone worthy of her." His voice roughened. "After she died, I kept it as a reminder of what I was fighting for." He looked up at Delilah, vulnerability plain in his face. "Now I'm thinking it might have a different purpose, if you want it." Delilah's breath caught in her throat. "Are you asking what I think you're asking, Ryker Vance?" "Not the most romantic setting," he acknowledged, glancing around the small bedroom. "And I'd prefer to be on one knee rather than flat on my back," but Delilah silenced him with a kiss. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "The answer is yes." The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand all along. By early December, Ryker had recovered enough to resume light duties as deputy. The story of the showdown at the Golden Nugget had spread throughout the territory, with embellishments growing more dramatic with each retelling. The Keating sisters and their cowboy defender had become minor celebrities in Miles City. The first snows of winter dusted the town as Christmas approached. Delilah and Ryker's wedding was planned for the spring, but preparations were already underway. Margaret had closed the shop for the evening to host a small engagement dinner, with only their closest friends in attendance. As Delilah arranged flowers on the dining table, Emma burst in from the shop below, her face flushed with excitement. "You'll never believe who just arrived on the afternoon stage," she announced. "Who?" Delilah asked, adjusting a recalcitrant bloom. "Aunt Beatrice." Delilah nearly dropped the vase. "Aunt Beatrice from Boston. Here," Emma nodded emphatically, "in the flesh. And she's brought Cousin Charlotte with her." Margaret appeared in the doorway, looking equal parts pleased and flustered. "Your father's older sister," she explained, though Delilah needed no reminder. "She wrote that she was coming for a visit, but I didn't expect her until after New Year's." "Where are they now?" Delilah asked, mentally calculating how their small home could accommodate 2 more guests. "At the hotel," Margaret replied. "They'll join us for dinner. Beatrice insisted they wouldn't impose on our living quarters." Emma giggled. I think she was horrified at the idea of staying above a shop. Aunt Beatrice Keating Whitney was their father's elder sister, who had married into Boston society and never let anyone forget it. Her rare letters were filled with not-so-subtle reminders of how the western branch of the family had fallen in status compared to her own privileged existence. "Does she know about the engagement?" Delilah asked, suddenly concerned. Aunt Beatrice had never approved of their father's choice to practice medicine in St. Louis rather than Boston, and she would certainly have opinions about Delilah's choice of husband. "I may have mentioned it in my last letter," Margaret admitted, "though I didn't go into detail about Ryker's." Background. The sound of boots on the stairs announced Ryker's arrival. He paused in the doorway, taking in their expressions. "What happened?" "My Aunt Beatrice from Boston has arrived unexpectedly," Delilah explained. "She's joining us for dinner tonight. Should I be worried?" he asked, only half joking. Emma grinned. "Terrified. Aunt Beatrice once made a railroad conductor cry. She's formidable," Delilah clarified, "and very particular about social standing. She won't approve of me marrying a deputy with no family connections." Ryker's expression hardened slightly. "I see. It doesn't matter," Delilah assured him quickly. "Her approval isn't required. I just wanted to warn you." He nodded, though she could tell he was unsettled by the news. For all his courage in facing outlaws, the prospect of Eastern social judgment was an entirely different kind of battle. Dinner that evening proved to be exactly as uncomfortable as Delilah had feared. Aunt Beatrice, a tall, imposing woman with steel-gray hair arranged in an elaborate style, dominated the conversation with tales of Boston society and not-so-subtle inquiries about Ryker's background. "And your family, Mr. Vance?" she asked, fixing him with a penetrating stare. "Are they in Montana as well?" "No, madam," Ryker replied politely. "My parents have passed on. I have no immediate family." "I see. And your education?" "Mostly practical, madam. My father taught me ranching. I've worked as a deputy in Wyoming and now here." Aunt Beatrice's disapproval was palpable. How? Rustic. And you believe this qualifies you to provide for my niece? Aunt Beatrice, Delilah protested. Ryker held up a hand to stop her objection. It's a fair question, he said, then turned back to the older woman. I own land outside of Cheyenne, my father's ranch. It's been leased these past few years while I've been otherwise occupied, but I plan to sell it and purchase property near Miles City. Between that and my position as deputy, yes, I believe I can provide adequately for your niece. And if Delilah wished to return east to civilization, Aunt Beatrice pressed, then we would discuss it, Ryker replied evenly. Her happiness is important to me. Aunt Beatrice, Delilah interjected firmly, Ryker saved Emma's and my life when our stagecoach was attacked. He nearly died protecting this town from outlaws. He is brave, honorable, and I love him. Your approval would mean a great deal to me, but it won't change my decision to marry him. A long silence followed her declaration. Finally, Aunt Beatrice set down her fork with precision. Well, she said, at least you've inherited your father's backbone, if not his good sense. Cousin Charlotte, a mousy young woman who had remained silent throughout the exchange, suddenly spoke up. I think it's romantic, she ventured timidly, like something from a novel. Aunt Beatrice's lips thinned in disapproval, but she said nothing more on the subject for the remainder of the dinner. Instead, she turned her attention to Emma, questioning her about her designs for the millinery shop and her own prospects for marriage. Later that night, after their guests had returned to their hotel, Delilah found Ryker on the balcony outside his room, staring up at the star-filled sky. I'm sorry about Aunt Beatrice, she said, joining him at the railing. She's always been difficult. She wants what's best for you, Ryker replied, his voice neutral. Can't fault her for that. Delilah studied his profile in the moonlight. You're not having second thoughts, are you? He turned to her, surprise evident in his expression. No, are you? Never, she assured him. But I know meeting Aunt Beatrice can be overwhelming. She has that effect on people. Ryker's lips quirked in a half-smile. Takes more than a disapproving aunt to scare me off, Delilah. She leaned against his shoulder. Good, because there's something I haven't told you yet. What's that? Aunt Beatrice has invited us to visit Boston next summer. All of us, even Aunt Margaret and Emma. Ryker tensed. Boston? We don't have to go, Delilah said quickly. It was just an invitation. He was quiet for a long moment. No, we should go. I've never seen Boston. Or any big eastern city, for that matter. Delilah looked up at him in surprise. Really? You'd be willing to go? I'd go anywhere with you, he said simply. Besides, might be interesting to see where your father grew up. Delilah wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head against his chest. Have I told you today that I love you, Ryker Vance? His arms came around her, holding her close. Not since breakfast, he murmured against her hair. Might need to hear it again. I love you, she whispered. Boston aunts and all their opinions can't change that. He tilted her chin up for a kiss. I love you too, Delilah Keating, more than I ever thought possible after everything that happened. In that moment, with the stars shining above and the man she loved holding her close, Delilah felt a sense of completion she had never expected to find in the wilds of Montana territory. Their path had begun in violence and fear, but it had led them here to a future bright with promise and possibility. The spring wedding of Deputy Ryker Vance and Miss Delilah Keating was the social event of the season in Miles City. Held in the newly constructed church, with flowers brought by special arrangement from Helena, it drew attendees from throughout the territory. Even Aunt Beatrice returned from Boston for the occasion, bringing trunks of gifts and no small amount of unsolicited advice. Delilah wore a gown of ivory silk that Margaret and Emma had worked on for months, adding delicate embroidery and pearl beading. As she walked down the aisle on Marshal Collins's arm, he having volunteered to stand in for her father, her eyes were fixed only on Ryker, handsome and somewhat uncomfortable in his new suit, waiting for her at the altar. The vows they exchanged were traditional, but the meaning behind them ran deeper than words could express. They had each saved the other not just from physical danger, but from the emptiness of lives defined by loss and duty alone. At the reception held in the town hall, Aunt Beatrice cornered Ryker while Delilah was busy with other guests. "I may have judged you too harshly, Mr. Vance," she admitted, surprising him with her directness. "My niece is happier than I've seen her since before her parents died." "Thank you, madam," Ryker replied, uncertain how else to respond to this unexpected concession. "However," she continued, her tone sharpening, "if you ever cause her unhappiness, you'll answer to me. Is that understood?" A smile tugged at his lips. Now he understood where Delilah had inherited her determination. "Perfectly, madam." Aunt Beatrice nodded once, satisfied, then swept away to critique the wedding cake. Later, as Ryker and Delilah shared their first dance as husband and wife, he told her about the exchange. She laughed, the sound bright in the crowded hall. "She's actually grown quite fond of you," Delilah assured him, "in her own way." "Terrifying thought," he replied, but his smile belied his words. As summer approached, Ryker purchased land 10 miles outside Miles City, a stretch of fertile valley with a creek running through it, and enough grazing land for a modest herd. Using the proceeds from the sale of his father's Wyoming ranch, he began building a proper home for his new family. Delilah continued assisting Dr. Wilson, who had come to rely on her organizational skills and knowledge. By autumn, the elderly physician was openly discussing taking her on as a partner, unprecedented for a woman in the territory, but a testament to her abilities. They delayed their promised visit to Boston until the following summer, wanting to establish their home properly first. The ranch house was completed by Christmas, a solid 2-story structure with plenty of room for family and guests. They named it Sunriver Ranch, for the way the morning light sparkled on the creek waters. Emma, who had blossomed in Miles City, began courting a young lieutenant from Fort Keogh, with Ryker keeping a watchful, if somewhat intimidating, eye on the proceedings. Margaret's millinery business expanded to include dressmaking, with Emma's designs growing increasingly popular among the territory's society women. Life settled into a pattern of hard work and simple joys. Ryker continued his duties as deputy while developing the ranch. Delilah divided her time between assisting Dr. Wilson and making their house a home. They rode together in the evenings, exploring their land and planning its future. On a warm evening in late August, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold, Delilah took Ryker's hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "I have news," she said softly. His eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You're certain?" She nodded, happiness bubbling up inside her. "Dr. Wilson confirmed it yesterday. The baby should arrive by early spring." Ryker's expression transformed from shock to wonder to joy in the space of seconds. Pulling her into his arms, he held her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "A family of our own," he whispered against her hair. "Yes," she replied, tears of happiness gathering in her eyes. "Our own family." As twilight deepened around Sunriver Ranch, Delilah marveled at how far they had come from that terrifying day when bandits had attacked the stagecoach. The path from there to here had been neither straight nor easy, but every step had led them exactly where they were meant to be. In March of 1878, Delilah gave birth to a son they named James Daniel Vance, James for Ryker's father and Daniel for Delilah's. The boy had his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined chin. a combination that promised an interesting future. 2 years later, a daughter joined the family, Catherine Margaret Vance, named for Ryker's sister and Delilah's aunt. Where James was sturdy and serious, Catherine was quick to laugh and explore, keeping her parents constantly on their toes. As the children grew, so did Sunriver Ranch. Ryker proved to have a talent for horse breeding, developing a line of sturdy, intelligent mounts that were sought after throughout the territory. Delilah eventually became Dr. Wilson's full partner, the first female doctor officially recognized in Montana Territory, a position that raised eyebrows but saved countless lives. Emma married her lieutenant, who eventually rose to captain and was stationed permanently at Fort Keogh. Their frequent visits to Sunriver Ranch filled the house with laughter and stories. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, as they sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard, Ryker took Delilah's hand. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Staying in Montana instead of returning east, taking a chance on a broken-down cowboy with nothing but revenge in his heart." Delilah looked at their entwined fingers, her slender hand in his larger, calloused one. Then she gazed at their children, healthy and happy in the fading light, and the home they had built together from nothing. "Never," she replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Not for a single moment." Ryker pulled her closer. "I thank God every day that Pike's gang chose your stagecoach," he said softly. "Terrible as it was, it led me to you, to this life I never dreamed I could have." "From the darkest moments come our greatest blessings," Delilah murmured, repeating something her father had often said. As the sun set behind the distant mountains, painting the valley in gold and purple, Ryker and Delilah Vance watched their children, the living embodiment of a love story that had begun in danger but flourished in peace. Their path forward stretched out before them, not always easy, but always together. And that, they both knew, was worth everything.